they're running the household, taking care of kids, they're going to work, and they're trying to fit all these things in. And, it's, even if it didn't at first feel like a lot, it has always still been a lot. So just because you wear it well doesn't mean it's not heavy, right?
Welcome to the Advanced Women's Health Podcast, where we empower women with the latest insights and advice on holistic health. From cutting-edge medical research to practical wellness tips, our mission is to help you thrive at every stage of life. Join us as we explore topics ranging from hormonal balance and reproductive health to nutrition and mental well-being. Whether you're seeking solutions for a specific health concern or simply want to enhance your overall wellness, you're in the right place. Let's embark on this journey to better health together. This is the Advanced Women's Health Podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of our conversation around weight loss resistance. In this episode with Dr. Samantha, we're going to talk specifically about weight loss and metabolic changes in perimenopause and menopause. Because if you haven't listened to part 1, probably would help to go back there first. We set some standards around how, again, weight is not caloric, it's hormonal, but there were unique changes that happen in midlife. And I hear from patients all the time that they feel like it's happening to them and their body's not working anymore and it feels like they're broken and all these types of things. When the reality is, in the research, there's very clear shifts that are happening. And so when we understand those, measure them, we can take action in a more specific and customized way, which is always what we're passionate about here at Advanced Women's Health. So, Dr. Samantha, walk me through, what are we seeing happening in perimenopause and menopause?
Yeah. So, in relation to weight changes with this time period, frequently what we'll start to see is people essentially are saying, I'm doing the exact same thing, eating the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And now I'm starting to gain weight. And, it's definitely not in their head that something is shifting, but we have to figure out, okay, what is shifting? So our sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, and even testosterone are very important in supporting weight loss and weight regulation. So a number of things that we see that we kind of will piece apart or discuss a bit further as we go. But things that we're noticing is like insulin sensitivity is reduced, or rather, so we start to have more resistance happening with those hormonal changes. We have a reduced stress tolerance. We start to have fragmented sleep, whether that's, driven by changes in thermoregulation or even just the hormones themselves. Where are fats getting distributed? What kind of fat we start to, or have more like a tendency to grow, changes in our thyroid, changes in our appetite, and also muscle mass changes as well.
Yeah.
So kind of the main things I wanted to make sure we'll hit through today.
Yeah. And I think that list sounds long, right?
Yeah.
And when we hear that, you're like, okay, so it could be your thyroid, your muscle, your sleep, this, that. It can feel really overwhelming for people. And I always say, if you're feeling that and you're going through that list and you're like, I could have all of those things, I'm screwed. I want you to flip it on its head and think that the reality is all of those things are modifiable when we understand them. And that is now a list of things that we can look at and treat, as opposed to you're like, I can't eat what I used to eat, I'm gaining weight. That's one thing. When you break that out and parse that out into individual sections and say, okay, is it insulin? Is it sleep? Is it visceral fat? And so we need to do something different for that. Is this related to XYZ? Then we just almost have this checklist that we can go through that can be really empowering, because then we say, okay, it looks like these 3 pieces are the most important. Let's just focus there on 2 of those, as opposed to, again, just feeling paralyzed by not getting the results that you want to get.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of those things that people will frequently say to me is, it's probably just part of aging. And I always want to be like, probably not. There's a lot of things that we can do.
Yeah.
Yes, certain things are going to change as we age and, we have to adjust as we go along. But within that, there's many, many modifiable factors. And that is definitely kind of the goal with explaining those factors, not to scare anyone, but rather to be like, these are things that we might want to look at in your appointment kind of thing.
Okay, I actually love that you went there. So I agree. When people say to me, they're like, they hit 40 and they're like, oh, I'm over the hill, I'm aging. And even these days, I make jokes about my age and the inevitability of not being cool anymore. But anyways, what are non-negotiables when it comes to aging? Like, meaning, what are the things that are absolutely going to happen to your body as you age that you don't have as much control over? Because that is a much smaller list than I think people think it is. So what are those things? Like, what happens as we age that we can't control?
Yeah. So one of the big things is going to be muscle loss. Like, as we pretty much after 30, it's, there's going to be a increased, sarcopenia, or rather losing more muscle mass. And while that is an unavoidable piece of life, so to speak, but there are a lot of things that we can do to combat that. And, even in the context of perimenopause, menopause, studies do reflect that women in that age group can build muscle comparatively to those in their 20s and 30s, just with some important caveats where we probably need to do increased volume and then also increased recovery time as well. We're kind of sticking to the literature on that one.
So what do you mean by that? Because that's not necessarily something that people know as a general term. So what does increased volume mean, and what does increased recovery mean as per the research?
So when we're looking at studies in muscle building, a lot of times it's saying, okay, we need X number of sets per week to achieve that. And so that number really changes a lot depending on who we're looking at. But essentially the trend is that we need to have more sets per week in that older age group. So for example, if you're doing a leg day and you're doing squats, you're increasing the number of sets within that and within probably each type of exercise.
Meaning, so to break it down, so reps are the number of exercises you do within a group. So if we say for progressive overload and for trying to get the muscle to be just damaged enough to grow, we're looking at most people, you're doing 8 to 10, right? You want to use a weight such that you can do 8 to 10 and then you're kind of at fatigue. So what you're saying is instead of doing 3 sets of 8 to 10, people might have to do 4 or 5 sets of 8 to 10.
Yeah. And it's not so much that it's a strict, like you have to do an extra set of your squat, an extra set of your deadlift, but rather over the course of the week, the studies show that you just have to have more of that volume.
Yeah.
And then with the same respect, you still have to make sure that you're giving your body enough recovery time. You will need more recovery time. So really that ends up looking like 2 to 3 times a week.
Longer.
Right? Versus,
Yeah.
So,
and that, just to break it down for people, we just have more growth factors. We have more hormones that contribute to growth. We have less inflammation. We have less cellular rusting and oxidative damage when we're younger. And so if you are looking at it and you're saying, okay, the signal to grow comes really, really easily when we're younger, and the signal to grow when we're older takes more. It takes more of those little micro damages. It takes more because there's less hormone. So what I always say to people is like, unfortunately, the reality is, and I have my hands up for people who aren't watching, there is going to be a balance of effort and hormone. So when you have a very robust level of hormone, meaning like estradiol, but in this specific situation, testosterone, DHEA, when that you have higher levels of that, there's less effort required. And so what happens, and what I think happens as we hit our 40s, is that shift comes into balance, right? So your hormones are dropping, your effort required to go up increases, but there's a point at which that shifts pretty dramatically where your effort needs to jump because your hormones have dropped. And people then say, well, what contributes to the hormone dropping? Okay, well, insulin resistance, inflammation, gut issues, chronic stress, nervous system activation, mitochondrial, like I go through the 5 to 7 causes of disease. All of those things add up over time. But I think that never will since moment that some people feel is that almost like earthquake moment for some people where they don't realize that the effort required is going to increase. And so they start losing muscle. They start increasing their insulin resistance. And then it goes on long enough of them trying to cut calories, losing more muscle, doing that. They come in and they're desperate and they're like, I just feel awful. And so there's this kind of recalibration that we have to do of effort to get back to that hormone growth factor balance. And I'm like dramatically oversimplifying it here, but I do just think the concept can be helpful for people to think through, because I was listening to a social media thing, which I never do anymore, but I shouldn't because I get angry. And they were like, just not acknowledging that there's an effort in the equation, right? And that's annoying, because when you're 20, you can drink your face off and go to work the next day and do a workout and eat like crap that night. And for some people, maintain it. I think I'm fortunate I was never able to do that. So I just didn't set that standard there. But there is effort in the equation. And I think when we're really realistic about that, but the effort is not diffuse, it's hyper targeted. It doesn't feel like you're trying so hard, because in this category, I find especially our type A women, they're trying so hard in every area. And I'm like, wow, that's tiring. Like, why don't we just take that energy and dedicate it in one direction and then see a result? So,
Yeah, for sure. And even kind of just still thinking around the whole muscle building thing, and that it does take more. The other thing, or more effort rather, the other thing to think about is that the protein requirements that we need actually kind of increase to get that same level of muscle protein synthesis. So it's very important. And then if we are actively trying to lose weight, then if we're not getting enough protein because we already have that higher risk of losing muscle mass, then we can lose up to 30% of the weight that we lose. It comes from muscle instead of fat. It should not be that high of a ratio. And so that's kind of another thing that we really have to be more conscious about and bring to be.
Do you know, is it the leucine requirement? This is just me being curious because I'm spending way too much time on PubMed. Is it like the total protein requirement that you see shift in menopause, or is it like specifically one of the amino acids called leucine? Do you know?
So, I mean, I know leucine is very important in terms of the mTOR pathway and signaling muscle growth. So absolutely, we're going to need to make sure we get enough of that in our day. Like, again, carry out muscle protein synthesis. But at the same time, in respect to like the studies that I'm referring to, it was a general
total protein. It's something that I'm finding fascinating and like diving into a little bit more, because protein is something that stimulates insulin quite a bit. And so insulin is our hormone that's involved with fat storage, but as we talked about in the last episode, it's also involved with amino acids. So I'll talk about muscle protein synthesis more. I have a podcast coming up where I break down kind of what's going on there in a bigger way. But one of the things that I'm consistently trying to pull out is, can we really refine it down this narrow? Can we refine it down to an amount of leucine that is absorbed? Because as we get older, with digestive issues, with stomach acid issues, we don't absorb as much. So can we isolate it to an absorbed total amino acid load? And that's what we're trying to achieve? Or is it that we just need 150 grams of protein, depending on the person? I'm very personally committed to this because I hate eating that much protein. I'll be completely honest. So I'm like, if I can eat half of that and like grow my muscles, I am about that life. But I'll get into this more in other episodes for anyone who's interested. But I just was wondering kind of what research you had seen with respect to it, because that's what I've seen too. It's just like a general protein.
Yeah. And I mean, now that sounds like a very interesting podcast. Can't wait to hear it. But
it's just going to be me whining a lot about amino acids and sitting on the USDA website calculating amino acid load.
But I do, that kind of thing about our changes in stomach acid and absorption and all that, that is another kind of player as we age, right? That it is going to happen. So how are we going to help it? And thinking about the quality of the proteins that we're consuming is a big deal. How digestible are the proteins, right? So if we know that we're now going to be slightly suboptimal with digestion, it becomes more important to think about the digestibility of the protein. How absorbable is it?
Yeah.
And so that is kind of another thing to think about. And then, yeah, of course, this amino acid piece of muscle building too. So
love it. Okay, let's do kind of the insulin and the where fat sits change, and then we'll talk about sleep.
Yeah. So, when we start to lose our estrogen is a really big, important player in our insulin sensitivity. So when we lose that, we then start to become more insulin resistant, unfortunately. And then also on that same front, when we are losing our estrogen, there's less promotion for subcutaneous fat deposition and more for visceral fat deposition. And when I say, so subcutaneous fat is sometimes maybe the fat that menstruating women will complain about on the hips and our thighs where, muffin top. When it comes to subcutaneous fat, that's not a fat that I'm so concerned about, right? That can be quite healthy and important, protect our reproductive organs. And
it's also like keeping you warm, right? It's on your arms. It's those types of things as well. Like it's such an important piece of health. Yeah.
Yeah. But when we start to lose that estrogen, now we're starting to notice that there is more like central deposition of our fat tissue and specifically visceral fat tissue. And that's the fat that is kind of going around our organs. And it's also very metabolically active. Visceral fat in itself essentially generates a low-grade inflammation in the body, which from a mitochondrial and a cellular perspective, that matters to us when we're thinking about weight loss. And then it also contributes and worsens insulin resistance. So it's a pretty tricky fat that we really do have to put more attention on in this phase of life because you're going to be more susceptible to growing it and having it deposit there. So that's definitely an important piece. And then, again, we're kind of bringing it in terms of, okay, what can we do? We know this fat is coming. One of the best studied ways to reduce visceral fat is resistance training. So we're bringing it back to weightlifting again. And, me being that reformed meathead and not just pushing resistance training.
How reformed she is. I think we should do a poll on this episode. How reformed is Sam?
Probably less than I'm trying to lead on. But the studies back it up. It's not just me. So it is something that we want to be thinking about in that situation. The other thing that, I think is also really great with the way that we carry out our appointments and things like that with our patients is we also have the opportunity to measure like our body composition, right? So we don't just care about your weight. We care about what distribution is visceral fat, what distribution is subcutaneous, and how much muscle mass you have, because then that helps us to track over time. And so that's another thing that is going to be useful in the context of weight loss in this age group, because you know what, if there is some level of subcutaneous fat, it doesn't bother me as much as if there's a high level of visceral fat.
And I say that to people all the time. This is really, like, as much as every point in life, numbers don't matter. This is really a point in life where numbers don't matter as much, because we have research that shows that having slightly higher body fat percentage than our like normal from a BMI perspective can be associated with all-cause mortality. But if all of that is in your abdomen, and we all see people in this category, right? Postmenopausal women with very tiny arms and very tiny legs and very round abdomens. If that is the distribution, that is not associated with a reduction in all-cause mortality. That is associated with cardiovascular disease, right? And so we do have to look at it and say, like, if you're heavier, but you've got muscle, and that's what's happening, or again, you have some of that subcutaneous fat, that can support bone health. That can support different aspects of our health. And that's why I think we use labs so much, because it's like if you're ragingly insulin resistant and your ESR and CRP, so inflammatory markers are high, and your triglycerides are high, and your fatty acids are high, I don't care what your weight is. Like, you're not good. And so really when we bring all of those things together, which is what we're doing in the metabolic rehab, it's like taking your labs and taking all of the metrics that we get from these machines and putting it into a calculator that we use internally to be able to spit out an understanding of what your actual health is. So it's not just like, oh, here's your target body fat percentage. It's like, okay, what is your visceral adiposity index? And what does this say about your inflammation? And all of those pieces together, because I think that's really where the magic happens for people, is when we can see these integrated systems and really come to understand what that means about our long-term health. Because yes, there's like aesthetic reasons with weight, for sure. And everyone's allowed to have aesthetic goals. I said that to a patient this morning. I was like, dude, like, don't justify to me. You can have whatever aesthetic goal you want to have. That's totally fine. But the reality is, a lot of times people are coming in because they're worried about their liver health. They're worried about their cardiovascular disease. They're worried about cognition and Alzheimer's disease. And so if we can look at a report and say, like, the reality is you're not doing too bad, then it changes how we think about weight loss as well. Because as you said, weight loss is a risk. And I don't think people think about that, because the risk is that you lose muscle. And that is a risk that I am very mindful of when I'm working with patients. And I don't think that's the case for a lot of different spaces, clinics, etc. Like, they're just like, weight loss is weight loss, end of day. That person is healthier when they're in a smaller frame. And I just disagree with that fundamentally. And again, like, I've talked about this so many times, but as someone who, one, dealt with weight loss resistance, two, was an obesity and immunology researcher, and three, has seen tens of thousands of people at this point, there is a difference in terms of how people's bodies respond. And there is a difference in people's body frame and size and all of those things. And we got really, really close to accepting that. And then Ozempic came. And that will help anyone lose weight at the right dosage. Like, pretty much anyone. There's a subcategory of people. If you're in it, reach out to us. We can help you. But outside of that, if you get your dosage high enough, you will not be able to eat and you will lose weight and a lot of muscle. And so we are kind of back in that skinny talk window. And I talked about that in a couple other podcasts, but we got so close to being in this space of like, oh, okay, you're 25% body fat, but your metrics are perfect. Like, rock on. That's great. Yeah. We love that for you. And I think it's slipping a little bit again, but I don't think the pendulum will swing as far this time as it has in the past.
Yeah. And I mean, even if somebody wants to think about it more so from a perspective of what's easier, well, I mean, obviously taking a pill is probably easy, but if
like injecting yourself and then doing what you want to do is kind of easy. I'm just going to own that.
Yeah. But if we're thinking, okay, so that's great. But then if we're not able, if we lose all that muscle, it is very hard to keep like eating the same amount because our metabolic rate is dwindling when we lose our muscle. So keeping that weight off becomes a lot harder over time. So, you know, it's choosing your heart. Are we doing it now? Or are we choosing it later kind of thing? So
totally.
Today's episode is brought to you by none other than Advanced Women's Health. If you are interested in diving in deeper to your health, if you are finally ready to feel like yourself, and you are finally over hearing everything's normal, everything's fine, and you want a deeper dive into your healthcare, then we are here to help you. We are currently helping patients in British Columbia and Ontario, Canada. But don't worry, if you're in another province, still reach out, get added to the wait list as we expand coast to coast. We cannot wait to work with you. Check out the show notes for more information on how to get started.
Well, then let's look at sleep. So we are due for an insomnia podcast. We've had a bunch of requests on that. So we will do one specifically on sleep and insomnia. But when it comes to how sleep affects metabolic function in perimenopause, can you break that down a little bit further?
Yeah, absolutely. So we want to think about both estrogen and progesterone in this case. Progesterone is a big one because it's really is going to impact how we're able to like sleep and stay asleep throughout the night, and how much deep sleep specifically that we're getting. So when our progesterone declines, so too can our deep sleep. And then the reason we care about deep sleep in relation to weight loss is that's kind of where all the metabolic magic happens. We become more insulin sensitive the more deep sleep we have. We have, our repair mechanisms happening to help us actually build more muscle during deep sleep. We also are essentially just cleaning up and detoxifying all the garbage that happened throughout the day. And then therefore we tie that back into cellular and mitochondrial health. So those are all very important pieces. And then in the context of estrogen and its decline, we then are also thinking about our thermoregulation. So if we are having night sweats and hot flashes and things, and our sleep becomes very fragmented, you're also going to reduce your deep sleep. And so those are really things that we need to be thinking about in terms of this like phase of life and how important that sleep is. So yeah, those are the big things that I think about when I'm chatting with a patient and trying to conceptualize how important deep sleep is for weight loss.
Yeah. And the research is just like so annoying in this area. As a mom, it's so frustrating because you see, and it's like in as little as 4 nights of fragmented sleep, you can have an increase insulin and glucose response to food in like within a day of a very short sleep, right? Like I think it was 4 or 5 hours or something. You can eat an extra ad lib 350 calories without realizing it.
Yeah.
Right. Your cravings go up. Your reaching for energy goes up. And it's this like double whammy because you're getting a lot more than 4 or 5 nights of dysfunction in a row. And you have more cravings and you lose some of the, like, again, that craving control. Plus you get more insulin released in response to a food. You have more glucose disruption and it's just like rude, frankly. And, but it's such a misconception that it can take a while to see the impacts of this. And it's like, oh yeah, I only I sleep most nights. I sleep okay. Well, if 4 of those nights is not great, we have cumulative metabolic impacts. And so focusing in on sleep is something that just gives so much control because there's so much that can be done, whether that's hormones, controlling your room, controlling the temperature, whether that is your nighttime routine, supplements for sleep, all of those types of things. There's so much that we can do to support it. It just, if you're not getting support, it is like a PTSD situation, right? Like you wake up in the middle of the night, you're up for 3 hours, you can't fall back asleep, then you wake up exhausted, you have cravings, it's overwhelming. And so I always say like sleep is one specific area. I'm like, okay, guys, like you really got to take this seriously because there is so much that can be done, but it doesn't, in this age category, it doesn't come without intervention, which I think when you admit it, it's easier to deal with. Whereas if people just keep thinking, okay, well, if I just go to bed an hour earlier, everything will be fine. There really is such a significant change, whether that's cortisol responsiveness or epinephrine or estrogen or progesterone, like everything shifts when it comes to our sleep requirements. Plus, we're not even talking about the increase in sleep apnea and inflammation. Like all of those things happen as well. The increase in sleep apnea in the person sleeping beside you. Like, it's not just one person. Sometimes it is, but there are many factors that come involved in this period of life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely one of the top things that I'll want to work on with someone ASAP if they want to get results weight loss wise. In terms of kind of similarly what we were talking there with in the daytime, it's going to impact your cortisol without sleep, but that's another kind of piece of the puzzle that our stress tolerance changes when we're in midlife. And as our progesterone declines, we suddenly were like, I was able to do 10 different tasks and carry through like a champ. And now it's so hard to carry through those tasks. So that's something else that tends to come up. Our stress responses are changing, which, as we talked about in part 1, like our cortisol it's a very big player in fat loss and achieving weight loss too. So
yeah. And we actually do see increases in morning cortisol, right? We can see cortisols. Normally we want to see it around 450. It's nothing in this age category. I'll test it 600, 700. People are like, oh my gosh, am I dying? And unfortunately, you do just have a really high level of cortisol. And I think it's because it is the perfect storm of physiological stress, identity stress, not sleeping. There's so many things happening with work and parents, like aging parents, and then kids. And it is really this kind of like collision course that can happen for people. Obviously, not everyone, but the people who do feel like they're in that situation is they're just sandwiched between kids, which nowadays, as many of us have kids later, your kids are still young while your parents are aging, right? And navigating that plus career transitions and everything else that comes with it, we can see, as you said, just like this feeling of overwhelm and burnout and exhaustion and loss of motivation. And I think the quicker we talk about it, the easier it becomes. And it's something that's so important for me to talk about. And I oftentimes frame it as like high functioning anxiety or high functioning depression, because it often is a period. It's not necessarily like a lifelong diagnosis. If you have major depressive disorder, if you have generalized anxiety disorder, obviously people navigate through seasons with those things. But there is this very unique kind of blooming of mental health concerns that happen in that category, that some of them obviously do fit into major diagnostic categories. We do know that the highest rate of suicide for women is 45 to 55. So there's a lot that's going on that very much needs very severe and serious support. But I think when women see other people in their life in those categories, the bit of depression, the bit of anxiety, the bit of overwhelm that's really impacting their quality of life, they don't take seriously enough. And you don't need to go on an SSRI or Cipralex or Zoloft, or you don't need to do that. In some situations you do, but there's so many things that we can do on the periphery before we get to that point that can help someone navigate through and support that reduction of stress tolerance.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, that's always another one of those pillars that we can never avoid. And especially in the context of our high performers, which I would say most of my perimenopause, menopause, I would put them in that category because, they're running the household, taking care of kids, they're going to work, and they're trying to fit all these things in. And, it's, even if it didn't at first feel like a lot, it has always still been a lot. So just because you wear it well doesn't mean it's not heavy, right? So that's often something I like to say to people, because, it's not just the perceived feeling, but also the actual demands we're putting on our body, and that eventually can catch up to us. And then,
yeah. And I think as someone, a lot of my friends are in that age category. It is really interesting to see how conversations do change, right? How you do see stress tolerance change, how you see people really struggling because the load that they did carry before, they're like, it's not harder. Like, I don't have more on my plate. Why am I not okay? And this like real resistance to not being okay. And of course, I'm always the annoying friend in the group chat who's like, hey, like, just so you know, my friend opinion is this, but my medical opinion is this. But it is really interesting to see that struggle in people, because there can be a really, like, not everyone has a naturopath in the group chat, right? And so there can be this really big window of time where there's a lack of acknowledgement because of the feelings around it. It's like, well, I can't do less. You know what I mean? This has to be okay because I have to get through it. And I'm like, yes, I understand all these pressures are not going to change, but you don't have to feel the way you feel as you get through it. And I think there is still this belief that you either need to like be on the top of a mountain, just relaxing and hanging out and having no pressure or stressors, or you need to be on an SSRI or a mental health medication in order to get through it. I'm like, whoa, there's like a very, very big section in the middle that's modifiable, that we use herbs and we use, again, diet and lifestyle and an understanding of labs and health to customize this window. But it's definitely been something that I've noticed like over the last 2 years, I would say, coming up in groups. And I'm like, guys, it's okay. But there is not a general public awareness of how this shows up. It's just like, oh, I just must be burnt out. I need to drop everything. I'm like, okay, yes, you're doing a lot, but there's other paths here.
For sure. And I mean, I always do try to reassure my patients in the sense of, I'm not going to tell you need to go and sit and meditate in a corner for hours in a day to help and bring your stress down, but rather we just have to figure out how we can better manage the stress, or not that the stress has to go away, but like, what are we going to do to help rein that in? And sometimes I think too, it's like in our society, like hustle, grind, all of that is so pushed, and people wear that with a badge of honor sometimes. I think that's kind of getting a little bit more debunked these days, but
not guilty. No.
yeah. And yeah, so essentially sometimes it's not like, I was just listening to something the other day and it said urgency is a choice, right? Yeah. We can choose to move through our day with intention, which would be what I would probably advocate for.
Yeah.
And then, but the urgency of I have to get this done, I have to do this, I have to do that we can scale that back. And if we think about it even differently, our bodies are going to respond to those things that we have to do in the day differently than if we're going like, I have to do this, have to do that. And you're just, right? So right there, we didn't even remove any stressors. We just kind of shifted the mindset a little bit.
I always say, and this is a total aside from the weight loss resistance conversation, but feels right to put it in. I always say, like, we need to get really serious about stress hygiene. And so even just having the routine, like I make my list once. It is right here beside me at all times. I don't make my list 10 times. I don't make my list and then go through in my head and sit there and be like, oh, what do I have to do? It's there. I write it down once. I know everything I need is there. I'm not trying to remember. I'm not exhausting mental energy on trying to remember those things. There's also, we have to be really realistic about what we can control and what we can't. And as I'm going to say as women, because that's largely the people that I work with and who I'm around. I'm sure there's many men that resonate with this, but we love to try to control shit that we can't control. And then the things we can control, we will push away. So I always say, like, make a list of the actual things you can control. Do a control inventory. And if you can't control it, let it go, or figure out a way you can get some semblance of control around it. And then things you can easily control, stop just pushing those aside. And it is shocking how much those two things, doing a control inventory and writing down a list that is super comprehensive once a day, just that can just really bring people into a space where they're not spitting out as much. Because you're right. Like, we all say, oh, you only have the same 24 hours in a day. But the reality is, yes, there's that, but it's also how you do those tasks. If I'm running late with patients and then I know I have meetings afterwards, I am not in a good headspace. You know what I mean? I'm like buzzing. I have adrenaline. I can't control that I'm running late. People need different things. So those days I have to put my feet on the ground, because it's so easy for me to remind myself that some people live like that all the time. And I think that's really the stuff that can be modified really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know that it might sound like an aside of us kind of talking about how to even just conceptualize these things, but stress is going to be a huge player. If we can manage that and bring it down, then fat loss will come off a lot easier. And so too will our insulin resistance is going to improve, all these things downstream. So even if sometimes we sound we're going a little late this way, there's a reason.
Yeah, totally. So if you could say then, where someone's listening, they're in perimenopause, or they're heading into menopause, they are feeling really overwhelmed by metabolic health and function, what would be like the top 2 things that you would say, these are your next steps, in terms of whether that's figuring out the right path for you, getting a diagnostic, whether that is treatment? Like, what are the top 2 things that you say go in this direction?
So I mean, for almost everyone, it's going to be, we need labs, right? Because I want to make sure that we're going in the direction that your physiology is telling us you're in, right? So that's step one before I'm even going to recommend anything.
Yeah.
Right. But outside of that, then we're talking sleep and muscle building would be my two main pieces.
If you had to choose one.
I got to go with sleep. I'm going to take a step back from the meathead. Resisting the urge, but yeah, sleep, because there's way too many other downstream effects of that. So,
and I would agree. And that's why, like, I always joke with our team, right? I'm like, you pick one, distill further. But if you are not sleeping, then not only is nutrition off, inflammation is off, your ability to recover from exercise is off, right? Like, to go back to our original point, you need longer periods of recovery for those muscles to build and develop. That happens during sleep. And so it is such a fundamental piece. And I will make sure that we get that insomnia podcast on the books, because I think there's many people listening to this being like, okay, I'm in. But yeah, if you are struggling with metabolic function, if you're feeling overwhelmed, if you're just struggling with perimenopause in general, we have so many people in our team who love working with this population, Dr. Samantha included. And so, yeah, I'm just so excited for people to get this info. And thank you for sharing today.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. And I hope people learned something that was helpful and not too overwhelming. Yeah. But if anything is overwhelming, then just reach out to us.
Yeah, exactly. And there is a little bit of overwhelm. I think it's also okay to acknowledge that. Like, that can feel overwhelming. That's why we have a bajillion years of schooling and practice and research and courses and all these things to be able to distill it down into a personalized plan. So yeah, never hesitate. We're here to support you. So, all right, everyone. Well, have a great day, and go eat some protein.
And work out and sleep.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you had as much fun as we did. And if you loved today's episode, share it with a friend and leave us a review. That is how we spread this message, and that is how we are going to revolutionize healthcare in Canada for women. Have a beautiful day and be well.